what happened. You want to pull the tape? You can pull the tape because we now got video.
Cannot be claimed for any semester in which the student is enrolled either full or part-time in a public school. Part-time in Idaho is defined as 2.5 hours. So if you're a homeschool student taking 1 or 2 courses at your public school for choir, orchestra, or shop, ballroom, that's still allowed under this bill. Qualified expenses do include K-12 tuition and fees for attending a non-public school, tutoring, nationally standardized tests, assessment for college admission, AP, and textbooks, curricula, and specific transportation costs to and from an academic instruction setting. So as with public schools and non-public school students right now, per current law, students must receive instruction in English, math, history, and science. It's existing law. And these families that apply to receive this refundable tax credit, families below 300% of the federal poverty limit get first priority on the tax credit. That's about $95,000 gross, about $65,000 roughly for adjusted gross. And if there are funds left over after those students below the 300% level of the federal poverty limit, then it will be open to families of any income. I want to emphasize that this bill does not take any funds away from public schools. There is a $50 million cap on this bill. I chair the Appropriations Committee. I'm not a fan of budget busting bills. This bill is capped and cannot change, increase or decrease unless a future legislature changes the law. The penalty for misusing this program is tax fraud, which includes up to a felony charge, as with any other tax fraud.
Folks, you are listening live right now to Representative Wendy Horman deliver the opening debate here on House Bill 93. This is a Idaho parental choice tax credit, up to $5,000 per child for your family if you so choose to enroll in this program and claim those funds. This school choice, this education freedom, money following the student. This debate has been going on in Idaho for a number of years now, with many different variations of bills, from education savings accounts and so forth. This bill just barely made it out of the House Rev and Tax Committee. 8-7, I believe, was the vote. And so this bill is now presented before the House. We'll listen to some of this debate that goes on. It looks like we'll probably hear from a few folks as this goes on. There's a couple other bills that are going to be on the floor today in the House, so I think it's going to be an active Friday here if they get to those bills. But let's listen in here a little bit longer to some of the debate. Brian Allman is also in the wing, so we'll bring him in here to talk through this as well. But let's dip in a little bit more.
In front of you today are examples of private schools in Idaho and their honest assessment of what they are able to provide as far as students with individualized needs. These schools cannot, and in many cases will not, provide certain individualized education for our students. And when I say qualifying education, when I say qualifying needs, I am talking about those things that are constitutionally required to determine if a child or any American is in needing of protections individually and apart from the general will of the public. And so this is our way to assure that public goods do not discriminate, right? Having a lower water fountain is a great example. And I believe that these private schools want to educate all children. It is not a lack of love of educating children that leads them to create these policies. It's a lack of resources, it's a lack of available workforce, and it's bottom lines. The point is, the students that will be not best served by this bill are Idaho's children and families with exceptional needs, and that should make us pause. To admit that a child has a need that is different and unique, like a visual impairment or a young child that's had multiple concussions due to playing sports, to admit a child should be educated differently than their peers for any reason means that the constitutional requirement is that we must provide an equal opportunity when education comes into play. And thank goodness, because just as the good lady from 33 reminded us earlier in the week, the value of Title IX in mandating schools provide an opportunity for women and girls to play sports.
Okay,
So
that
too
is
does the
Representative
Constitution
Monica
require-
Church, the Democrat from D19, debating in the negative on this bill. Brian Allman is with us. Let's see if we can bring both of us up and what's going on the floor. Can producers do? Whoa, look at that! Fantastic.
Let me
Brian,
move this over on my screen so that when I look at it, I'm looking in the right direction. Otherwise,
yeah,
it just
yeah, there you go. There you go. Very good. All right, Brian. Well, today's the day. I think most people said that they do expect it to pass the House, but I mean, people were so sure it was going to pass the committee, and it barely got out of there. So, why don't you bring everybody up to speed on where we are with education freedom, school choice? I mean, this has been a hotly contested issue for a number of years now.
Yeah, obviously, I'm old enough to remember when President George W. Bush made school vouchers one of his priorities, and it never really went anywhere. He cast it as a civil rights issue, saying that, poor minority children in cities are not getting a good enough education. And, if we let the money follow the student, then perhaps their parents can take them somewhere that they'll get a better opportunity. So it's been bubbling for a long time. And then we've got Arizona really just went whole hog with universal school choice. Florida's gone there. Iowa's gone there. Numerous testifiers have pointed out, debaters have pointed out, that Idaho is one of the only red states that doesn't really have a program where money follows the student. Monica Church here, Representative Church, obviously she is a public school teacher, or has been, and is defending that system and wanting to keep it maintain that control. And I do think this will pass the House. This bill is sponsored by leadership. It's Representative Jason Monks on the House side is a co-sponsor. He's the House Majority Leader. Representative Wendy Horman is the primary sponsor. She's the co-chair of JFAC. On the other side, you've got Senator Lori Den Hartog, the Senate Majority Leader, and Senator Scott Grow, the Senate JFAC chair. So they're behind it. The speaker's made it known that he's behind it as well. Republican leadership is behind it. So I think it definitely goes through the House. Senate, I think, will be close. I think there's some folks right on the edge who can be persuaded one way or the other. And we're going to see people like Representative Church here trying to get her debate into the record to perhaps sway those people. I don't think this is necessarily for the House. This is for the next step when it comes to the Senate.
Yeah, and then, of course, there's other competing ideas out there. Representative Clow had something that he presented. You've got the expanding the Empowering Parents program that Senator Lent on the other chamber was doing. And then, of course, the House Bill number 1, which was submitted as a personal bill, which went way beyond this bill here in terms of the refundable tax credit, the limits, and that sort of thing. And then, of course, the ESA, Education Savings Account idea that we've seen before. So, I mean, I don't know. I think the idea here is like, let's get something on the books that can then be dealt with later on. I mean, Wendy Horman just stated, this is capped at $50 million. It can't decrease or increase unless the legislature passes another law to do so. And so maybe this is just like, let's just get something on the books that we can then hopefully maybe expand or work on later. I don't know if this is the answer to all of our dreams, which I've said on this program already. I don't think it is. The answer to our dreams is our culture. It's shifting the culture and completely getting rid of the DEI in our schools, the DEI that is in our accreditation agencies that hold our schools hostage, and just changing the culture. I mean, we have to change the culture. And then, of course, the constitutional amendment that Representative Hawkins is discussing. I think that is fundamental in this as well. But I don't know, Joe. I mean, is that your take on this, Allman? That you think that this might just be a way to open the door for expanding on this differently in the future?
I do. I think this is a first step. I wrote a couple of days ago at the Gem State Chronicle about the high-level view, political philosophy type of discussion about the state of public education and where it needs to go. Because public education, as it is now, is something that was essentially invented in the 1800s. This idea that we take all the students and we compel them to go into a single room and we teach them all equally, and then they come out of it ready to be good employees or ready to be good voters, ready to be good citizens. And I think it's definitely changed since then. The founders of our Constitution, of our state, wrote into our Constitution that we are going to provide for this because they believed that universal education was necessary. But remember, that was in a time when education was sometimes a luxury. If you were usually just taught at home, or if your family was rich enough, you could afford a tutor. And then you had, the classic one-room schoolhouse on the prairie. But the idea of a system of public, free, uniform schools was what was considered revolutionary and progressive at the time. So yeah, I think it's the first step toward reforming the system as a whole. It gives parents an off-ramp from the public system who might not otherwise be able to do it.
Yeah.
Because maybe they don't have time, they don't have money, they don't have the resources. This will give them help if they want to leave the system. And the way this bill is structured, it's got this survey that LSO will send out to everybody claiming the tax credit, basically asking them what they think of it. And it's also the tax commission is going to report to the legislature how many people applied for it, how many people applied but couldn't do it because we'd already reached the cap. And those things together, I think, are going to provide valuable information for the legislature next year and the years after. Maybe it won't be popular. Maybe only a few hundred people will take advantage of it. And then we'll say, okay, well, I guess we overestimated how much people wanted school choice in Idaho. But I suspect we're going to see that a lot of people want this. And that will put pressure on the legislature to expand it in the future, to expand the credit so that parents can take advantage of more money. Remember, this is $5,000, whereas the state right now spends $8,000 to $9,000 per student in public schools, and also expand the cap so that more families can participate. I see Representative Erickson here.
Yeah, we'll dip in on his argument here in a second, but I just to put a highlight on one of your points there of this being an off ramp for parents that may have been dying to try and get out of the public school system. In order to just highlight, if this is that successful and more parents come out of the school system and use this credit for other things, and then word gets out about how great it is outside of the public school system, this really, highlights and puts the spotlight even brighter on the school system to make a change. Because let's is this Garner? Who's this guy?
Mm-hmm.
This is a program that will raise a cost to our taxpayers and grow government. In the fiscal note, they notice that they say that there's 2 employees that they're looking for that will take care of this. Well, the tax commission is looking for those employees probably because they need them in their already assigned duties. This will grow government, and it will affect our taxpayers and our local government.
Notice who always debates against growing government when it's a thing they don't like.
Rising costs
they don't mind growing government
continue to grow.
Right.
Long-term government and dependency on that system will also continue to grow. How do you tell someone when you reach the cap simply because they didn't file their tax notices online on time, as this bill has a date in it, that they cannot be eligible for this program? This program will grow.
Well, that happens all the time.
So I ask you,
when you're trying to enroll in something and there's a deadline and you miss it.
I think it was Representative Horman or Senator Dan Hartog in the committee hearing was listing off all the different programs throughout the country that are first come, first served tax credits. So It's not unprecedented.
Right. Yeah. But the point on growing government and having this be another government program that doesn't use, that sets aside a chunk of money to be given out in this direction. I've heard there's so many different arguments all over the place on where all this money comes from. We got to hear this.
It does not explain how the state tax commission
Representative Mickelson
is then going to go and double check to make sure people aren't double dipping in the empowering parents and this tax credit. There's
This
also
is-
nothing in this bill that says that they can't stack and combine different programs. So they would, first off, they could get the $5,000 tax credit.
There's a trend
Then
with
they could get
Mickelson
the
here that I want to
25
point out after this, Alman.
Opportunities program. So we would be sending out all kinds of money that wouldn't necessarily show how fiscally responsible we are. It's also, there's an excess of payouts. They could get $5,000 from the grant. A family of 3 could get $5,000 for each child from the grant. They could get the empowering parents, because there's no mechanism to make sure that they're not doing both. Then they could get $2,500 for the advanced opportunities. So a family with 3 children could get over $25,000 of our tax dollars just for their children.
This is the
bill has
Southeast
a lack
Idaho Caucus
of oversight. I think we need to
debating
be
against
very
the bill.
careful that we stop triple dipping and we make sure that there are appropriate guardrails in this bill to make sure that
Yeah,
the taxpayers are
every time I
protected.
hear Mickelson complain about something, it's always that she thinks that the regular people of Idaho are fraudsters. She's always talking about that, Alman. She's always saying, how do we know they're not just gonna do this? How do we know they're not just gonna take the credit and then dump their children back in the public school system? I mean, it's almost like projection at this point.
Remember, it was Representative Mickelson who last year famously denounced homeschooling in general, saying,
yes,
I forget exactly what she said, but it was a very negative opinion of the entire concept of homeschooling.
Very negative, very negative. Yes, Fluffy Did It has a great comment. You can throw that up there.
I've been a blessed person I've been blessed in my life when it comes to the financial aspect. I've been able to actually make choices that a lot of other people have not been able to make. And I've been able to put my kids through private school almost their entire lives. We've tried public school. I can tell you from what it met with my family, it just did not seem to work out very well. We attempted a charter school at one point in time, thinking that those might be a good fit. And they honestly were not a good fit for my family. And I was blessed to be able to make that choice, but not every family is actually blessed to be able to make that choice. Now we're talking about taxpayer money and we're talking about accountability. It is their money. This isn't a government program we're actually spending on. We're actually giving it back to the people of Idaho. That is their money. And I think that's a misnotion that we're actually having, that all of a sudden we're now protecting their money in some way. No, this is their money that we're saying that they have the right to actually go decide what they actually want to do and how they want to educate their kids. What we've seen during the destruction of COVID-19, we didn't get to see as a family, for my family, because where we were at school, they didn't miss a beat. We didn't have to wear masks. We didn't have to deal with any of the other stuff. We really didn't even have a problem that actually went on. It was like normal life. And where all the other kids that live around us, it was mass chaos. Kids run around the neighborhood all the time. Parents are trying to figure out how to not work to watch their kids, and our kids got actually educated during that. So to say that I am the only one that, because of that I've been financially able to be able to do this, is ridiculous, because it is not a choice that just me as somebody that has the ability financially to be able to make this decision. It should be any person in the state of Idaho that has kids should be able to make that decision for themselves on where they want to send their kids and what type of education they actually want to have their kids have. So for that, I'd say this should get your green light easy, and please pass this bill. Thank you.
Further debate on the motion. Good gentleman from 11.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To debate the motion.
Gentleman has the floor.
Thank you. So to reflect the opinions and comments from the good gentleman from District 28, I echo many of those sentiments. I feel my main objection with this bill is that it takes the role of government out of its proper role and expands it into the sphere of privatized education and putting more control over that. And I have an issue with that. I feel like the bill is, I hate to use the words, but I feel like it's another type of a social welfare program. I don't feel that it's not that we don't have choice. I think that's a common misnomer. We have school choice. Parents have the ability to educate their children how they see fit with the funds that they have. And I get that it's more difficult for some than it is for others, and I totally respect that. But I don't feel like it's in the place of the government to let me rephrase, Parents should not have to go to the government and ask for permission to get their money back so that they can educate their kids with that money. I'm sorry. So I guess to conclude, I am voting no against this bill. And okay, I'm sorry. The final point I'd like to make here is that the people that have been pushing the hardest for this bill are the lobbyists. I've received emails and calls from a couple of parents in my district and around the state who have they've expressed a desire to get this bill pushed through. Largely, the people that have raised objection to this bill are the homeschool parents. And I have received literally hundreds of emails of very respectfully crafted and individually tailored emails from homeschool families, as well as public school families all over the state of Idaho. And I have to respect the wishes of those people and honor the constituents who elected me. And I thank you for the time.
Further debate on the motion? Gentleman 25.
That was an interesting perspective.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, to debate the bill.
Absolutely, yeah.
Has the floor.
Yeah, first of all, I want to recognize.
Like we said, there's a lot of opinions on this issue.
32 and all the sponsors on this bill, but I want to explain to you why I can't support it.
I'm telling you, Alman, it's not looking good. When you had Kaler, Lucas Kaler stand up and basically not support this bill, which means it sounds like you could use that same argument for HB1, which one of his close colleagues, Clint Hostetler, brought in.
It'll be interesting to see if Hostetler debates on this.
Yeah.
Representative Clow is obviously debating against this. He's got his own school choice bill that he just introduced yesterday, which I assume is not going anywhere.
Right.
A bill like this, generally speaking, say, well, what do you mean we need more choice? We have charter schools, home schools, we have open enrollment, we have private schools, and we have empowering parents grants. I've supported all those things, although I have some reluctance now on the empowering parents grants that we're doing. But we do not have an efficient way to allow families of low income to move their children from a public school or any of those other choices into a private school or an education plan of their choice. This bill will reimburse families that have already made the choice. Most of them are already in a private school. So we're talking about $50 million. Now, there is a limit in this bill that talks about that you have to qualify for some aspects of it to be under 300% of the poverty level.
I suspect this still passes because oftentimes everyone who's against it will get up and debate.
$90,000. And I'm going to, and of course, some of these might be families of 3, which would have a lower, but there could be some families of 6 or 8. And so the dollar amount goes up with that. And I don't have a problem with having some form of a means test because I think that was a good decision by the sponsors of this. But we're talking about right now having about 17,000 private school students. Some people say it's 20, some people say it's a little less than that, but there's roughly 17,000. And many of these are average families. Many of these students are in families that are going to automatically qualify for a tax credit. They're already in a private school and they're automatically going to qualify. So we're not increasing those students into the program. And once the application period doesn't come to an end, but gets to a point, I can't remember the exact date, then it opens up to anybody that has income above 300%. And guess what? That's virtually every other private school student in the system. So I can't see us ever falling short of spending the $50 million. But then there's some other little problems.
Representative Foreman taking notes there to prepare for her closing argument.
This is not going to significantly increase the numbers of students that have never been able to afford a choice to make a choice. It's going to be mostly reimbursing families that have previously made a choice.
Yeah, I disagree with that.
They can use the money for qualified expenses.
You don't know
and they provided in this an advance payment. And that's basically, it's not the exact words, but basically a student with 300% or below can get advance payment because they don't have any money to pay the first tuition to qualify for a tax credit. so they can get an advance payment. The problem is nowhere in the bill does it say do they pay it back. That same student, the family can use the advance payment and then qualify for a full $5,000 tax credit in that tax year, and then get that tax credit. But it doesn't require them to use that money to repay the advance. Now, if you're an employer, and one of your employees comes to you and says, "Yeah, I get paid in 2 weeks, but can I get an advance on my check?" You know what that means. That means that you have to pay it back. It's going to come out of your check. Excuse me.
As far as I understand, the whole purpose of an advance on a tax credit is that it's the same credit you get, you just get it early.
Gentleman that's very supportive of this bill yesterday, and he says, "Oh, it's not an advance, it's a grant." And I said, "Well, it doesn't say it's a grant." He says they don't have to pay it back. And I said, "Well, where in the fiscal note does it say there's $50 million of tax credits and so many millions of dollars of advances?" So I have a little bit of a problem with that. And I think it could have been technically written a little bit differently, but the advance payments is it's a good option if we're going to do this. But we might as well say.
Alman, I don't see this bill passing today.
I think it still passes. It's we're hearing the debates from the people who are against it, but I think most of the caucus is going to vote for it. If it fails, that's a real indictment of the leadership of the House Republican leaders, because they're all behind this, and they've been whipping votes.
42.5 million. So that means that there's $7.5 million.
And so far, we've heard the Democrat, we've heard the Southeastern Republicans, basically the Main Street Caucus or whatever's left of that.
I hope it works out better than some of my numbers.
Representative Kaler coming in with the kind of the homeschool perspective, what former Senator Scott Herndon's been pushing on social media recently. And now Representative Clow, who has his own bill.
Do we just want to give back to the families?
I don't know, we'll see.
Made the choice, some of our tax funds.
Yeah. For those viewers who are like us and like to watch these things unfold in real time, throw it in the comments. What do you think?
Good idea.
You think this passes the House? You think it does or doesn't?
Every parent has to fill out a survey if they're going to qualify for renewal. But why are we having our legislative services office do that? They're supposed to be helping the floor.
Yeah, the comment there about it doesn't force homeschoolers to take the credit. The bill does not actually talk about homeschoolers at all. It leaves it completely ambiguous.
I can imagine if I walked up
homeschoolers, as I understand it, homeschool families can claim their expenses like curricula or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's not actually defined in the bill, so it's not like it's going to bring regulation down on homeschoolers.
Well, correct. But one of the arguments that I've heard is that in other states where something like this has happened, homeschoolers take a credit without any strings attached or anything like that, large, big curriculum strings attached. And then they become dependent upon this. And then all of a sudden strings appear later on. And then homeschool families are now stuck with either if they want to continue taking this credit or putting their kids in public school or finding another means of educating their children. So, I mean, ultimately what this comes down to, Alman, is what I've been trying to pound away is fix the public school system, get the government out of this business entirely, perhaps, and really just put it in our Constitution that the state shall have or that the parents are the sole arbiters, the sole authority on the education, being responsible for the education of their children, or shall not be infringed, whatever the language is in Hawkins' bill. So
Representative Hawkins has the proposed constitutional amendment that would change that to take away the compulsory education component and confirm that parents are most responsible. Beyond that, though, I mean, I hear people, conservatives, say we need to take money away from the public education system. Otherwise, it's not going to fix anything. And maybe that's true, but politically, we're not at that place yet. Any inkling of taking anything away from the public education system is met with fierce resistance. The governor has apparently said that's an absolute non-starter.
Right.
So,
right.
Art
but
of the
possible, argument,
got to do whatever we can at the time we're in, and then do more later.
Yeah, and look, the way the system is set up now, we'll see who stands up to debate. If we want to dip into their debate here in a second,
My
but the way
screen's a
the
little higher
system
to Representative Sauter.
solder, but the way the debate, I mean, the way the system is set up now, folks, is that the government has a responsibility to run and to fund a free public education system. Okay. Free, and the word free, I don't even know how that even got into the statute, but nothing is free, right? So it's a cost to you. The whole point, the whole point is that the legislature here in Idaho is tasked with having a public school system. We have to fund a public school system. So the only way to take advantage of the dollars that are being spent on education in Idaho is to send your child to that institution. And that institution may have been the greatest thing since sliced bread at the time, but now it's rotten, it's holy, it's moldy, it's terrible. And so parents are saying, why do I have to keep sending A, my tax dollars, and B, my children to your crappy schools? And again, I know there's some good schools and there are some good teachers, right? But the system as a whole is broken across the United States, right? And it doesn't work for everybody. So if you are sitting there thinking, the state is already spending $8,000 to $9,000, $10,000 on my child to send them to their institution. Why can't you give me just half of that and I'll go find my other institution, right? Mm-hmm. That's the argument being made with this type of bill is you're already paying for my child in public school. So why don't you just give me a little bit of that and I'll go educate my child somewhere else? That's the argument being made here. And it makes sense from a practical, common sense, way to look at it. But you have you have a big problem here when you're looking at the amounts and you're saying, wait, so the state is just going to turn around and give up to $5,000 per child to a family of 5, $25,000 cash money to go start your own. To go get your children educated. Like I understand people have they can't comprehend that. But that's the system we're in. And that's why we're having these arguments. I mean, it can go back and forth. It's incredible. It's incredible, Wallman.
Yeah. Phone calls.
What the progressive era has done to us.
Out on the
it's true.
Trail, I also get a lot of comments from seniors that they're really tired of paying to educate someone else's kids. Now, while I don't agree with that, to me, this bill exacerbates that. So now, rather than the seniors in my area contributing,
so there you go. So Sauter's against this. Well, he's not with the leadership.
Yeah, I didn't expect Sauter to support it, but his argument that sending $5,000 to a family to educate their children is worse than sending $9,000 to schools to educate that same child.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying, like, where, but again, you could say, well, that $9,000 goes towards teachers and unions and infrastructure, and it helps, it creates jobs, right?
Yep, that's like I said in my article the other day. The people who are making out well in the current system want to keep the current system. They don't like any of this. So the teacher unions, the administrators, the bureaucracy, they love this.
Yep.
And the idea that public funds shouldn't go to private institutions. That's first of all, it's a complete non-starter. We already have the launch grant, which takes $8,000 per student and gives it to a private institution for workforce training.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Schools, when you build a school, that's not the government building the school. It's a private contractor. The people who mow the grass are sometimes they're school employees, but other times they outsource it to a private contractor. That's public money going to private companies.
That's right. And Allman up here in Coeur d'Alene, in the Coeur d'Alene school district, they pay Washington. They pay companies in Washington for milk and produce and food for the school lunches. So the money is not even staying in Idaho. So
we don't grow our food and milk the cows in the backyard of the elementary school for their lunches.
No, they don't. We have to pay to private business to fund all these things. And in some cases it's not even within I mean, I've looked through tons of budgets at school districts, and like the amount of things that they pay Amazon.com for, mm-hmm. the amount of things they bill a Washington, they get a bill, they have to pay a bill from Washington for there. So it's
Is this issue really, I'm wondering if really this issue is ripe and that we've really sorted it all out. So to me, I think we're running a little too far ahead of schedule. February and March have lots of time in them, April if need be. But anyway, I'm just concerned about that as well. So with that, I'm a red light on this one. Thank you.
For the debate on the motion, good gentleman, 27.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To
Representative Raybould was kind of lurking behind Representative Sauter there. She debated heavily against this in
as the House
committee.
Education
That's
Chair,
true.
a lot of people come up to me and they say, why is a
See what Pickett says.
legislator from a rural public school area would you support this bill? And that's a great question, and one that I've thought about a lot. And I think the representative, the good gentleman from one, maybe even indicated some of the reasons why I support this bill, because the allegation is made that perhaps this bill's wealth redistribution, or I've even heard the term welfare used from time to time. The fact of the matter is that rural public schools cost more to run per student than urban public schools. I certainly hope that the implication wouldn't be made that me or my children have received wealth redistribution or welfare to be educated in a rural public school. The idea that this choice or these private school opportunities aren't available in rural areas sometimes presupposes the notion that this is only because there isn't.
Pickett is from Cassia County, down in the south, very rural.
Generate that opportunity.
Interesting here, though. He is the chair. Oh no, he's not the chair. Is he the chair?
He's
chair of House. Yeah, he's the chair of the House Education Committee, so he does have a leadership position, and it's within this realm here, and he's standing up here in support of this bill, and also pushing back. I like how he pushed back on the notion that, because rural schools cost more, am I benefiting more, from welfare because of this? This is the situation we've got ourselves into when government starts funding a program that we probably had no need to be in the first place. But yet here we are. So let's see if he wraps this up.
Down in the first class that had 900 students in it.
By the way, I guess it's going to pass 45 to 24.
That dynamic.
That's your tally.
That's my guess.
It's so easy to be
45-24.
In those days, we used our social security number. We wrote them in our textbooks, and when I went to see my test score, it was listed by the social security number, not by my name. We wouldn't even think about doing those things nowadays. But it's so easy to become lost in the crowd. And when I think about the fact that I do need perhaps a little bit more funding in my rural public school than the urban setting, I also think that maybe I ought to be cognizant of those needs in those larger schools to students that fall through the cracks, that maybe aren't noticed on a daily basis because the ability or the capacity just isn't there in that type of a setting to recognize the need that the parents see when those kids come home from school and their needs aren't being met. And for those reasons, I see a cause to support this choice. And I appreciate the work of the sponsors and all the debate on both sides of this issue. I think they're all very valid points. But this is just,
and we've heard many different arguments from many different sides.
All the choice questions, answer all the questions. It's just another option.
Now, the text of the bill does not reference the Department of Education or the Board of Education at all. This is entirely done through the Tax Commission with a little bit of help from LSO.
It's another choice.
So it's interesting to see the Education Chair talk about it because they deliberately crafted this bill so it doesn't touch any statutes related to education, which is why it went through the Revenue Tax Committee, not the Education
Committee. I hope
Committee.
you'll consider that this is something that is valid. It is a good option. And perhaps there'll be other options come forward. I appreciate the dynamic educational choice opportunities that exist in our state, all of them. I think they're all moving us down the path that we need to go to, and I urge your support of this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
All right, folks, we are going on 40 minutes here of debate on House Bill 93. This is the school choice tax credit, refundable tax credit of up to $5,000 per student if you wish to take them out of public school and do schooling on your own, either through private or homeschooling or what have you. It looks like we have this is a freshman here, I believe. Who is this? Oh no, that's Weber.
Yeah, Weber.
All right. Let's take a tally here.
I care about every child's educational experience in Idaho, and I stand with some concerns. During the committee public hearing, I raised some questions about bringing in 2 state agencies into the education realm.
So we can see here that he's probably going to be a no.
He's the vice chair of the Rev and Tax Committee, and he debated against it in committee.
Okay, good. All right. Well, why don't we do this, Brian? Like I said, we've been going on 40 minutes on this. We've got a lot of things we wanted to cover today. But one thing, just so we can take a break for just a second. We won't go to a break, but we'll just break it up for just a second. Senator Ben Taves presented a bill. Was it this morning or yesterday? I think it was yesterday. Yeah, it was yesterday in the Senate Local Government and Taxation Committee, dealing somewhat with this issue. He presented a bill that would exempt homeschooling families from having to pay levies or taxes or property taxes that go to education that they're not using. And so let's listen to a little bit of that.
Legislation would modify Section 63-602 to provide an exemption to education-related property tax levies for the primary residence of families with a school-aged child who do not accept any educational funds from the state. This allows families who bear the financial burden of their children's education a property tax reduction to help offset their educational costs. Just to speak to what this does, usually it's going to be, I'd say, like a homeschooling family. Let's say they have 4 kids. They're probably not using, maybe if you figured an average of $8,000, which I think is low, of state money, they're not using about $32,000 a year that they would be using if they're in the school system of tax dollars. I estimate that they'd probably save, depending on their county, maybe $400, $500 per year. So not a huge tax savings, but maybe it could help cover some of their curriculum costs. So anyway, I appreciate your support of printing this bill.
Yeah, there we go, Brian. That was it did get printed. And so now that bill is Senate Bill 1074. So if folks want to dive into that, you can head over there and check out Senate Bill 1074. So again, another way to try and help homeschooling families relieve some of their costs that they don't use. I don't know if this thing passes. I mean, that feels like it opens up another can of worms for like folks who don't drive on the roads. Do I have to pay gas tax if I need gas for my tractor? Right. I mean, it's so bizarre how many arguments that might open up to make. I'm not necessarily opposed to it. Especially when you look at the federal government and how much of our taxes go towards things we hate and don't use. But there was Senator Taves with that bill yesterday, which hopefully seeks to give some sort of relief here.
Representative Redmond's coming up here. He might have something.
The debate we've seen today. There's
Senator Taves' bill is the sort of thing, thinking outside the box.
Issue.
Yeah.
And I love that we also all represent our districts in very unique ways. In District 3, where I'm from, I actually worked on a school choice tax task force this past year, and it was really well attended, and we had a number of different ideas and thoughts. And I can tell you that in District 3, there is so many families that are longing for and want some sort of choice and some different options. And I think that's exactly what this bill does. I think that competition is extremely healthy in life. I think competition is healthy in every avenue. And I think that, with high seas raises all ships, right? And I think this will make our public school systems better. I think this will make our private school systems better. I think there'll be a better outcome for our kids with this bill. I really appreciate the gentleman from 11 concerns and how he's representing his district, especially dealing with homeschoolers. I was homeschooled personally, and my wife and I have chose to homeschool our 6 children. And so we work in a number of different homeschool groups, and you're exactly right. There are a lot of folks that do not want any kind of intervention. But there's also a number of homeschool families that really want this, and there's other families that would like to homeschool that don't have that opportunity currently because of the financial burden. I think that this is a great solution, a very good option, and I would urge your green light. Thank you.
For the debate on the motion.
Very good
gentleman.
arguments there from from Representative Redmond.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, to debate the bill.
Gentleman
That's
has
my
the
rep.
floor to debate the motion.
Thank you. Good ladies and good gentlemen of the body, I'd like to talk a little bit about this bill and specifically about choice and competition. I'm a free market guy, and two of the pillars of free market.
Now, this came through his committee,
economies
right,
are
Brian?
choice and
He's
competition.
chairman, Representative Cannon is chairman of the Revenue Tax Committee, and he spoke in
Say a
favor
lot,
of the
and
bill.
You've probably heard me say it, and I apologize for
Basically reiterating what he said.
saying
What he
something
said
that
in
you've heard me
committee.
say
Yeah.
before, but I believe that
Very good.
free markets and specifically choice and competition.
Yeah,
have
I
done
think
more
there's
to-
I think there's an element here. I mean, you might be right. It might go 45-24. I think it's going to be a little closer. But I think it's going to, I think we're going to dip into the 30s. I think it'll be in the 30s, Allman. That's my guess. But I mean, you know, what I liked about Redmond's debate was him acknowledging Lucas Kaler's debate. And at the end of the day, the debate for, and we've seen it said in the chat, this is optional. It's purely optional. No one is being forced into this. A homeschooling family does not have to do this if they don't want to. Maybe they try it 1 year and they say that we're out, we don't want to do this, and they're out. I get it. The concerns that this thing would just drain funds from public schools. I mean, when you fund public schools with how many people are in school, and we've seen the sort of, whether it's a declining rate of students being enrolled or stagnant, sort of plateauing, schools that have been dependent upon, I mean, now we're dealing with COVID money, all the COVID money that they got, and then they just expanded. We had a school district in my school district up here. They had to close an elementary school because there was no more COVID funding, and so they had to contract because the enrollment had plateaued or dropped, and so you're seeing that happen. And so public schools are going to be hurting no matter what. But again, we've also had these historic investments, right, Allman? Historic investments in education.
Historic and unprecedented investments in education.
That's right. And we don't see improvements. And we're still dealing with so many other issues. And then on top of that, there's all the social issues that many of these folks like Redmond or folks that we stand up, that we know in the back of their mind, they're just saying we need to save our kids from these indoctrination centers that are having a dramatic impact on these children's lives. I mean, furries, you know, these poor kids that have to deal with furries in their class because they think they're a cat. I mean, it's incredible. It's absolutely incredible what's going on in some of these schools that are being, and they're just being enabled to do that. So I understand we want to have some sort of off ramp to be able to get these children out of these schools. The litter box in the bathroom thing, Allman, right now that's an urban legend. Until somebody gets me photographs, that is an urban legend. I'm not falling for the litter box in the room because I have put out bounties. So you give me a photo of that and I'll pay you cash money. But until that happens, my friends, that is an urban legend. Litter boxes in the bathroom. You can say all day, oh no, somebody told me they saw it. I don't care, man. Content is king. You get me video, you get me. I actually don't want video. If you just get me a photograph, then maybe I'll do that.
I've been a little distracted here watching what Representative Cannon's been doing with his glasses, taking them on, putting them on, taking them off.
That's how you make points. You know, you put them on and then you take them off to make a point. Yeah.
Anyway, on your point, the whole litter box thing, that's a distraction from the awful things that are actually documented that is happening in our schools, and so well we don't need to go that crazy. We can there's enough we can criticize between the social justice indoctrination, the LGBTQ, the transgender social contagion that's being pushed, and then the fact that they're not even educating our children. All the standardized tests say that 30 to 40% of students are proficient at their grade level in reading and writing and math. So what are we even doing? What are these $9,000 per student on average going for? Just it's It's so ridiculous. If public schools were as great as the opponents of this bill, many of the opponents of this bill get up and say they are, that we don't need this or we shouldn't have this because it's going to take away from the public system, then we wouldn't have any demand for it.
That's right. That's right. But we know that change can happen within the public school system because we have public charters, right? Mm-hmm. We have public charters. There's one up here, Kootenai Classical, that runs at a Hillsdale curriculum. It's a fantastic schools. They have over 800 kids on a waiting list for a free public charter school.
Yeah.
So don't tell me that the school system isn't broken and we're fine. And also don't tell me that there isn't a way to change the school system so that it's still funded the way the Constitution says, the way all this stuff says. I mean, these charter schools, and there's many other charter schools with different types of curriculum and different things that they focus on, that have waiting lists because they're not sitting under this indoctrination, full of all these indoctrination camps from the woke left. So it can be fixed. It can be fixed if we have the will and the spine and the right people to go into these institutions and say, and just shut the door. You shut the door, throw this garbage curriculum out, and start from a place of traditional American values, and math, reading, and science. Looks like Cannon finished. We'll see who comes up next here. I know, Alman, your feed is
has the floor.
I'd like to give a different perspective on this bill and what it allows us to do.
Tony Wisniewski from the Post Falls area up in North Idaho.
An important issue and why there is such a demand by the public for this kind of thing. Every rational human being recognizes the importance of education. It is a search for the truth. It is a passing of knowledge and ultimately wisdom to our next generation. Second only to motherhood, the teaching profession is the highest and most noble profession. Unfortunately, we have burdened our teachers with a whole lot of things that don't include teaching. We want them to be the disciplinarian, the emotional supporter, the counselor and mentor. Our country was founded on Judeo-Christian principles. At the time of Idaho's statehood and the adoption of its constitution in 1890s, the Bible was used in every single classroom.
The way he's standing, it frames it nicely on the pillar.
In history, reading, and as a model for virtue and moral behavior. The First Amendment to the Constitution of the United States states, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or the free exercise thereof. This is a federal mandate, a federal restriction. It has nothing to do with the states. The federal government is acting outside of its bounds. The first violation of states' rights in the area of education, most people think happened in 1962 with the Supreme Court banning prayer in school. But we really have to look back to an earlier Supreme Court decision, Everson versus Board of Education in 1947. This was the very first time that the Supreme Court ruled that the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment applied to the states. It clearly does not. Now, once I'd like to ask for unanimous consent to read from the majority decision of that Supreme Court case.
Unanimous consent has been requested to read from the majority decision of the Supreme Court case. Is there an objection? Hearing none, the gentleman has the floor to read.
On the House floor, if you want to read something, you have to ask permission from the body.
The clause against establishment of religion by law was intended to erect, quote, a wall of separation between church and state. Now, this is right out of the majority decision. There is nothing in the Constitution that has a wall of separation between the church and the state. Everybody knows that this is a private letter that Jefferson wrote to the Danbury Baptists, and it is not to be found in the Constitution.
This is an important point.
The court pulled that quote out and misrepresented it, and for the first time applied the Establishment Clause and its control over the states in the area of education. Now, unfortunately, the legal principle of stare decisis obligates courts in the future to depend on the precedent set by a previous court. So once this misguided principle was applied, we see the ball rolling down the hill with ever increasing speed. In 1962, as we mentioned, the school prayer issue was addressed, and the Supreme Court banned the use of school prayer in school. And once again, they used the same words, the constitutional wall of separation between church and state. Once again, it's a false doctrine that was perpetuated by that 1947 decision. And then the ball kept rolling down the hill. In Stone versus Graham in 1980, the Supreme Court overruled a Kentucky law that required the 10 Commandments to be posted in every classroom. And then we saw what happened with the Roe versus Wade and the other court decisions against sodomy that were struck down in the state of Georgia. Now, the 10th Amendment states that the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states, respectively, and to the people. We have those rights, not the federal government telling us what to do. We have to remember that the federal government is the creation of the states. We are the masters, but unfortunately, we have usurped our.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to have a point of order that we are not debating the bill right now. We're debating a whole lot of other issues, and I think we need to keep our debate to the bill. Thank you.
Good lady, I think the gentleman's talking about history, but I think he's bringing it right back to the bill real quick.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's important that if we don't understand the historical dilemma that we're in, we'll never dig ourselves out of it, and we will be having these discussions in perpetuity. Federal government is the creature of the state. We are the masters, but unfortunately, we've allowed the creature to rule over us in matters where they have no absolute jurisdiction. And fortunately, we have seen a reversal of some of these stare decisis decisions. The Coach Kennedy case that our good representative from Idaho Falls is very familiar with, and the Dobbs decision. So here we have two court decisions that are diametrically opposed to each other. Which one is the correct one? You know, if we can't make up a decision, we have a problem. Well, when prayer was outlawed in the school.
Gentleman 13.
Mr. Speaker, I do appreciate and agree with what the man's saying, but that Dobbs decision doesn't have anything to do with school choice.
You're right, sir. I'm just indicating that this.
5.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Let's get our discussion back to the bill if we can, please. The objections are noted. The gentleman can continue to debate the bill. But come to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With the absence of prayer in the school and the use of the Bible in the school, which is also a Supreme Court decision, and the 10 Commandments, nature obviously abhors a vacuum. And so something else crept into the school system. It's called secular humanism and Darwinism. The teachers who are proponents of Darwinism.
Gentlemen, please come back to the bill on choice. We don't need to talk about Darwinism. We need to stay on the bill.
Yes,
this
sir.
is very different than the U.S. Congress.
It's the frustrations of somebody like Representative Wisniewski, who is
that's the point that I'm trying to make
he is laying out the intellectual and historical foundation for the argument he's going to make. But
that is being allowed in the school. Number one, there is no God. All of creation is a series of.
Back to the bill before us. The gentleman from 13.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was just going to let you know, I love what you say, and I agree with what you're saying, but that's not the bill in front of the body, Mr. Speaker, and we have to stick to the bill. There's a lot of things I'd like to say, but we've got to, in order to keep this on track, we got to stick to the bill.
Gentleman from 15, do you have a comment, or are you just standing with your cord? Thank you, good gentleman. All right, good gentleman, please stick to the bill. We all understand the history, and we appreciate the history lessons. But
well, I don't know if they all understand the history.
That's the problem.
Right.
Article 3 of the Idaho Constitution says that the first concern of all good government is the virtue and sobriety of the people and the purity of the home. The legislature should further all wise and well-directed efforts for the promotion of temperance and morality. Now, there are two possible solutions to satisfy the requirements of some people. Number one is to roll back the clock to where people were satisfied with the school system in Idaho around the founding of the state and the writing of the Constitution. Certainly that was involved with the use of the Bible and moral principles and virtue. Folks,
Quick programming note here. As they try to keep Tony on track here, Representative Wisniewski, we have to go off the air after an hour. That's just how we have our system set up here. And so, but you will be able to continue to watching this. If you want to go to citizensallianceidaho.org, hit the Take Action button. And down at the bottom, you'll see another button. I'm sorry, it's not as easy as it is to just give you one URL. But if you go to Take Action at that website, our website there, you can hit the button that says Watch the Live Stream, and then that'll bring you right to the place where you can watch the House. Unless you, of course, watch it elsewhere on the internet. If you once we go off the air here, just head over to citizensallianceidaho.org, poke around the website there, you'll find it. Hit the Take Action button, and you can see watch the live stream as this continues to go. It looks like Mr. Representative Wisniewski's wrapped it up.
I also believe in school choice, and I think that's probably how all of us feel in this room. When my children were very young, I was on the first charter school board in the state.
Representative Cornelius?
He voted against in committee.
He voted against in committee. Yeah, very good.
And I truly believe in
folks, just a couple other things as we watch the floor here, just to get you up to speed on. There were a few bills yesterday that I think are still important that we wanted to talk about. Obviously, we talked about the property tax exemption for homeschooling families, that sort of thing. Senator Josh Cole presented a bill that would reduce the threshold for cities to have districts when they're electing city council. So right now, if your city is over 100,000 people, then you need to have districts where you elect a city council person from each district. If you're under that threshold, then the city council candidates can be anywhere within the city. So they can all be spread about, or they can all come from one little neighborhood. It doesn't really matter. But his bill would lower that threshold. So for instance, it would go down to 25,000 people. So if you live in a city, for instance, up here in Coeur d'Alene, that is under 100,000, but over 25, if it's over 25,000, then you're going to need to create districts in order to figure out which candidates are out there.
Real quick on that, there's 3 cities that are currently districted because they're over 100,000: Boise, Meridian, and Nampa. I'm not sure if they've completed their districting yet, but this would also add Idaho Falls, Caldwell, Pocatello, Coeur d'Alene, Twin Falls, Rexburg, Post Falls, Lewiston, Eagle, Moscow, and possibly Kuna, which is right under the 25,000 threshold.
Yeah, there you go. So that's a bill that got printed, and it'll have a hearing, and we'll see how that goes. There was also some sexual education, some sexuality bill that Representative Ehart brought in. Foreman's bill on the WHO got out of committee, I believe.
This morning, the big debate this morning in Senate State Affairs was the constitutional amendment proposed constitutional amendment to make it so that initiative petitioners have to get 6% of voters in all 35 districts instead of just 18. Or is it districts or counties? Anyway, it would require them to canvass the entire state instead of just sticking around in a few large places.
Yeah, that was in the Senate. Senator Doug Okonowitz had that bill. But then House Bill 85, which would have allowed the governor to veto a ballot initiative that passed, that was actually died in a tie vote. Yep. If you have a tie vote, your motion fails, and so that didn't go through. So maybe they'll try and bring that back. There were some great arguments and great clips there to show you. So we'll get those uploaded. We'll get back to these on Monday. And then a great one from Elaine Price about consent agenda items in city councils and places like that, where if you are a city council person who wants to take something off the consent agenda, that you should be allowed to do so. So that bill got printed.
Everywhere.
Say again?
Is that not always the case? Here in Eagle, the city council members, the mayor, or even citizens have the right to pull an item off the consent agenda.
Yeah, that's not the case. And Barbara Ehart had a great comment on that, and we'll have comments on that as well too. So, folks, you can head over to the Idaho Public Television, watch the rest of the debate on House Bill 93 there, or you can head over to citizensallianceidaho.org, find the watch the stream button, and you can watch it there as well. I thank you for joining us today. Thank you, Brian, for hanging out with me here. I know you'll be watching it. Follow him, Gem State Brian, and he'll continue it over there on X, and of course have a big write up on that too. Good to see you, Brian.
Yeah, thanks, Matt.
All right, guys, we'll see. Yeah, everybody have a great weekend. See you next time.
This bill, I think, it puts a stake in the ground that says we have a sovereign right to protect what's ours.